Hello and welcome everybody to the Six Pixels Under podcast. I am Nerd Slayer, your host. Episode 94. We've had like 2 or 3 weeks off, so it's hello to everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I had a good time in Colorado, actually, in the mountains. I put some pictures on my Instagram if you guys are curious. Lots of hiking, so it was a pretty healthy trip, but all in all, I would say it was very important for me to unwind, get connected to. I'd like to think we've got 2 subscribers already, actually, before the stream even started, really. First is Sork. I'd like to thank Sork for his second month subscribing at tier 1. Thank you. Here's your tip for a tip. And then Wolrek. Thank you for subscribing for 3 months. That's a 3-month streak. Thank you for the Twitch Prime subscription. Appreciate that, Wolrek. There's your tip, guys. All right. Well, how's everything been since I've been gone? Obviously, you guys have been keeping things going. It's not like things have changed much. What games have I been playing? Probably Crusader Kings the most. I'm not sure what you guys have been playing lately, but Crusader Kings 3 is really fun. It's probably my favorite RTS right now because, yes, it's slow, and that is a problem. But like, what I like about it is I like that it's more about consistency of play than it is about like an outplay or maybe 1 or 2 outplays. Don't get me wrong, you can definitely outplay people, but it's more about consistency. I guess when you put it that way, it's like higher percentage that if you consistently make good and versus like having one big swing attack or something. Like in StarCraft, you could just cheese somebody and then all of a sudden you win. And StarCraft is what I played loads of. StarCraft is just, it's very fast paced and swingy. One bad battle, let's say you didn't micro Marine properly or some shit, or your medevacs weren't like in the correct area. Next thing you know, boom, you lost the fight. Crusader Kings 2 was fun. Marry wife, jail her, have kid, kill wife, marry kid. Pete. Yeah, I'm grateful for Game Pass, especially on PC, because I can't afford buying these full price games. Like, I totally get you guys. That's why I'm always trying to help you guys come up with like when a game is worth spending money and time on, because you know I'm right there with you. Like, I don't want to spend my money and time on something I can't, you know. But with the Game Pass, it's been pretty helpful. Having access to a lot of games. Now, speaking of the Game Pass, I figured I'd use that as my segue into the crazy news that we missed a week ago. And that news came out in way smaller. Pause
Bethesda,
you.
maker of popular games like
No, let's pause you. Hey, it's Mr. Phil. So Microsoft decided to buy Bethesda, as the article on, for $7.5 billion to boost Xbox. Now, this isn't a huge surprise to people who've been following the scene, just because Microsoft has slowly been acquiring game companies, especially RPG companies, for a number of years now. For example, they acquired In Exile Entertainment, which is the guys behind Planescape Torment. Well, more so behind of a Numenera, I should say. And then they also just did Wasteland 3, right? So they've got them. They also picked up, of course, Obsidian, which then did the Worlds, and working on other projects, of course. One of those is supposed to be like I think it's supposed to be like Pillars of Eternity, like Skyrim, basically, is like what people were saying. So, needless to say, there's a lot of talented RPG developers and just IPs in general in the Microsoft/Xbox wing. And this has to be, we don't talk about consoles as much here, but have to remark on the fact that this probably is in some type of fact that PlayStation has been doing this for some time now. Now, why do I think this is like so relevant for online games, which is what I primarily focus on? I would have to say it's probably because it's hard that this doesn't affect us. Zenimax was already working on another MMO. Now that they're acquired by Microsoft, it makes you wonder, like, what is going to happen with that game. Microsoft hasn't necessarily been the rather publisher to have like a very militant perspective on things. In fact, that's more like Electronic Arts. Microsoft, from everything I've been told from people who've worked with them, and I got to speak to somebody that worked at Beam, if you guys remember. By all accounts, like Microsoft is very much like they'll give you the rope, but if you hang yourself with it, then you hung yourself. There's kind of like they're not going to be forgiving, just like any other American corporation. Since that when we give you the money up front, you have to be willing to take the fall if you can't satisfy the ROI or whatever our interests are. So this is interesting to see because now this gives them the ability, the position to go more head to head in terms of RPGs with PlayStation. But something I want to mention, I guess, is how is this going to affect MMO? Zenimax Online also being acquired, of course. ESO also being acquired. Of course, questions have been, coming to the surface, I guess, regarding ESO and its future. And Matt Fior, the president of, and I think, I don't want to say CEO of ZOO or Zenimax Online, he said that it's business as usual. So ESO being acquired, he said, the leader said everything's fine, which is, of course, what a leader says in situations like that. But it probably is fine. ESO is probably not going to get much change. And I don't really think we're going to see Microsoft come in here and really change too much how things are. Now, what they will change is expectations for ZeniMax and Bethesda. The interesting thing is we were just remarking about how they were a private company, which means that they didn't have stock, right? They weren't funded by the public in any way, and they were self-funded. And so now it seems as if maybe funding is something that they're very much interested in, something that they wanted to be, maybe the people in charge, the people on the board, wanted to be set up for life as well. There's a lot of like decisions that go into making such a big move like this, but it's very likely a lot of decisions that go into, meaning that it's not just one thing. Maybe probably all of the above. Is my dog running around? Ella. Ella. Um, where are we at? So they said here, with the acquisition of Bethesda, we metaphorically and literally double our gaming content capacity. Wow, crazy. Any other quotes here? Let's see. I guess the only other thing it mentions here is which is relevant, is it mentions the timing of very fortuitous launch of the next consoles is coming, and obviously gives fans of Xbox a lot of faith. But the thing about Xbox is it's not really as much fighting for exclusivity, PlayStation necessarily. And I think you have to take a step back to see their approach a little bit more. And it's definitely, talking to a former employee, as I mentioned, has something to do with Pass, right? Like Game Pass, I think Phil Spencer basically realized we need to switch to being a subscription-based platform. And that was the way to go, of course, with the rise of subscription-based platforms. And now you just have Xbox as a platform, both on the console, both on PC, and it's been working. It's been working. Xbox, let's just be honest, they lost the race. They lost it for a while, and PlayStation was beating them up with all exclusives, which of course piss me off. Exclusives are funny to me. They piss people off. Sorry, just because I grew up playing consoles, I guess, and games have always been exclusive. I guess maybe it's because games are becoming more platform these days, more kind of approachable, more accessible, higher standards in that respect. But I don't know. I felt like it was nothing but exclusives growing up. It was quite she made sure to get herself in camp. Definitely like superstar personality. Always has to be the center of it. She went with us on our trek up the mountains. You did really well. Dog that came from like, my ass plane. Let me see if I can find another what I mentioned. Let's see. Yeah, so this is where it was said. So Matt Fior said ESO will continue to be supported exactly as it was, and we fully expect it to keep growing and thriving on each of the platforms that are currently supported. Bethsoft's Pete Hines called Microsoft the fit. There you go. Maybe I need to get closer to the mic. My volume might be too low. It's possible. Very possible. Can you guys hear me all right? Let me make sure. What are my settings? Yes. I'll pay. Start yelling and being eccentric like all of the pink, green-haired streamers. I'll pay $50 a week if you do. Funny thing is that I've actually thought about dyeing my hair pretty recently. In jiu-jitsu, whenever you compete, a lot of people dye their hair because it's kind of like just a cool way when you go out there on the mats and people are watching you to just differentiate yourself. Not that I need more of that. I already look like a caveman mixed with like a serial killer, but like I'm just saying I used to have bleach blonde hair. Then when I started losing the blonde hair, I would like highlight my front part and then I would spike it up. Remember that was the do like back when boy bands were cool. Well, they still kind of are cool. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I don't really get as much into them too. Not that I obviously don't like Korean music or Korean culture. I'm literally learning Korean right now. In fact, look look at what I've been doing. I really recommend this, by the way. Have you guys ever heard of Pimsleur? This is not an ad. I'm not sponsored. This is literally a trial. I've been learning Korean using Pimsleur, and it's really helpful for somebody like me that has, I guess I would say, well, it's hard to say a disability because I have advantages in other ways, but I'm not the best at taking things, I guess, instructional, on an instructional basis. So, like, if I look at instructions and I have to just read out, a lot of the time I have trouble focusing, have a hard time kind of taking that information. Not that I can't read, because I love read. I read at a very high level since I was young, but more so that it's like I have a hard time kind of like placing it. You know what I'm saying? I guess you would say that my brain explicitly struggles, whereas implicitly doesn't. We've talked about this before. I don't, I can't recollect that effectively, probably due to PTSD trauma, but I can relate to things and not necessarily know, like, put it like simply. Like, it's more helpful for me to learn from a like program talks to you, type things out or click things. Have to like, you know what I'm saying? Like, those don't really work that well. I know some people love to just write down and do vocab, and in fact, my girlfriend is like, very much. She's a vocab person, that kind of way. I'm not. I have to hear the sounds. I have to just kind of like immerse myself in it. Do I learn better by doing? Absolutely. You're taking our blonde. Yeah, speaking of which, not a segue at all, but I mentioned Limpos. My yeah, how's it going, Ness? Been a while. But I was mentioning Limpos about my heritage. The crazy story is when you look at my heritage, it makes sense why I'm so giant. So my great grandpa, he was old as shit. He was already like 6'5", 6'6" still, like 80s. So when I tell people that, they're usually, he was giant. We used to call him Big Papa. So it turns out his, and no, not that Big Papa, hands in the air if you use a true player, that one. We used to, so he was a flight commander, World War II, and he got to travel the world. His parents were, his dad was a Scottish man, and his mom was Swedish. But where it's interesting is that the Scottish dad is Scottish. Sorry, the dad of the dad is Scottish, right? Of course, someone has to be for the son to be. But the mom is Norwegian, and it goes back far. It goes back to I think it's Bertrand. Is the city? Is it Bertrand? Probably no. Not trying to butcher. I think it's Bertrand. And then I think it was most of my family Oslo, I believe. And there's still family there, which is, I believe I have more Scottish family that side of the pool. But yeah, it was interesting. If you guys have ever looked into your own ancestries or histories, I recommend it. Sometimes you can find a lot of free resources. You can just get a couple of names, maybe some of the people in your family. Maybe somebody kept records or something like that. Well, it's hard to track the Mexican side of my family because no records over there. Unfortunately, I just know that my great grandpa, who was Aztec, was born in Zacatecas, I believe, to Nuevo Leon, and that's pretty much where the records go. Like, like it doesn't go further back than that, basically. Yeah, unfortunately, Mexico didn't keep the best records. Doesn't go as far back that side of the family, whereas my other side of the family goes back to like 1700s. I think like my Norwegian family went back to like the 1400s. They were like soldiers. It was crazy. Yeah, I know. I'm like a weird like boiling pot. I'm Scottish, so I've got Gaelic blood. I'm Aztec, which is crazy. And then I've got obviously the Norwegian. Oh, it's those are primarily where my bloods come from that I could trace. But I do have blood from, so my dad is half Mexican, 25% Austrian, 25% Czech, which is so weird. I learned this shit. So it makes sense why got the dark eyes, you know, got the Czech European eyes. They're also very Mexican. Looks like I never sleep, but also just, yeah, his family, Czech, Austrian, Mexican, and then he's a mutt, just like me. We're all kinds of things. The Aztecs, though, they're very interesting people. I recommend you guys look into them. If you've never learned about the Aztecs, they're probably one of the most interesting indigenous tribes, especially like I would say in the region that is now Mexico. Obviously, it wasn't Mexico then. You honestly age gracefully. You look early. Yeah, I'm 27. How old do you think I am? Did you guys hear about Mike Morhaime? He started a new company. It's pretty crazy, but yeah, apparently the ex co-founder slash CEO, well, I guess he's still technically a co-founder, but he's an ex CEO. Mike Morhaime, pretty much everybody knows, Blizzard, left the company and announced his company, Dreamhaven, would be working on 2 internal projects. And each of them, rather, there's 2 internal teams that are working on a new game each, and is headed by other Blizzard veterans. The articles. What else does it state? It says Dreamhaven is designed as an overarching company offering guidance and funding. Within each development studios can open. Its first 2 internal studios are Moonshot and Secret Door. Okay, so it's almost like a publishing brand. Or maybe like a like a Warframe kind of thing. Is it Warframe that I'm thinking of? Or Wargaming? Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Where they have like a bunch of different like companies. They have like the one in Seattle, they have the one over here. I guess Blizzard did that early on, so Morhaime would be kind of hip to it. They did that with the whole Blizzard North thing. Whenever they made like Diablo and they had like the As for like details on these games, I don't really think there is any detail. It tells you who the studio head is though. Jason Chase is the studio head for Moonshot. He was a producer who worked on Hearthstone, lead producer who worked on StarCraft 2. That's pretty cool. He's joined by Dustin Broder, which I actually remember from StarCraft 2. Interesting. And Heroes of the Storm. I would say that he is a good developer. Ben Thompson, creative director on Hearthstone. I think Hearthstone has a good creative direction, so sounds good to me. Secret Door studio head is Chris Sagatti, executive producer on Hearthstone, StarCraft 2, Heroes of the Storm. So basically, Blizzard talent. He's joined by Eric Dodds, first game director on Hearthstone. So an original game director on Hearthstone. Lots of Hearthstone talent. This makes me think, like, are we doing online RTS games? Are we doing card game? What are we doing here? I'm interested to see what Mike Morhaime and Dreamhaven and then the two studios under them, Moonshot and Secret Door, have in store for us.
Hey, thanks.
I guess I should do it like that, right? Should actually let like the train. How's it going, card? 21 months. Crazy. Do you think Obsidian might get the ability to make a sequel to Fallout New Vegas? They do have the rights, and now that they're under the same banner, that's a good point, actually. They do have the legal ability game, like as far as I know. So that's very like possible, that's very probable. As for is it possible? I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do with Fallout. I feel like they were cool with messing up with Fallout 76. Take some kind of, a little bit of that, if you will, to test out their multiplayer capabilities. But as for what they're gonna do with the going forward, I think it's a really ripe one for it, if I'm being honest. So it's very likely that they could have already been working on it. I mean, they said that they wanted their next MMO to be more ambitious. Not to say that ESO isn't ambitious, but I think Fallout would be pretty crazy in that respect. But then it would seem as if it's almost like competing with Fallout 6 in a sense. And although they were okay with it losing, they're not necessarily okay with not making money. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep supporting it. That will be interesting to see. That look in your eyes, I think you'd like. I would like it to happen. As much as I'm not as high on Fallout New Vegas as a lot of people are, I definitely think that it's the kind of storyline that requires a little bit more nuance, and I'm always for more nuanced storylines. It was kind of my problem with Outer Worlds, actually, is that it came across too like I don't know what's the best way to put it. It was just too over the top, I think. Too on the nose. Yeah, there you go, on the nose. It was too on the nose. I think I wanted a little bit more, like, you think about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and that's a very mature plot line. That is a very, like, mature plot line that's also just, like, multi-layered. Like, play through so many different... You can play through it and also kind of have different perspectives based on who... I think that that's just really interesting. You're a Fallout fan, been one since Fallout, like the original Fallout. That's pretty impressive. That's a long time fan. I would love to see a true post-apocalyptic MMO with actual survival mechanics, and then like an overworld that you had to like brave the... I've talked about this before, but this is my idea. I talked about this actually with Indigo Gaming. It was like our idea for like a Fallout MMO was like make it post-apocalyptic overworld that's really dangerous when you're out there, kind of like radiation and stuff. And so if you go to certain key areas where there's like PvP, you have to have like radiation gear, just like in Fallout. And so traveling around in that world is kind of a dynamic content. You could then choose to have instances if you wanted, open world dungeons, harder to do, but probably instances would at least be possible. Kind of like Dark Eden approach, or Diablo, you guys are probably more familiar with. Load in and go into another tile, another map, and then you just keep progressing that way. I think that could be pretty cool. So like Shroud of the Avatar and Wasteland 2. Yeah, I would say though that the difference would, it doesn't have to be a 3D game, a 3D MMO. Could be, right? It doesn't have to be. If it is, I'd rather it be more styled like Morrowind, or like, I don't know if Fallout 4 gameplay. If it is, then I'm okay with that kind of game. But Morrowind gameplay, I'm fine with if that's what it takes for players on screen. What I'm saying. But I think it would work well as well because basically the content creates itself because of scarcity. So because players don't have the ammo infinite, they have to craft, they need resources, they need gear, they need maybe even food or things like that to survive, maybe to get buffs or something. They have to venture out into the overworld and go to these areas that are kind of abandoned. So maybe you can even claim these areas. Maybe these areas get, consistently reattacked by ghouls and radiated monsters and things like that happen. Maybe even like thugs and what do they call them? Kaisar, Kaisar's Legion, something like that. Yeah, and actually, you made me remember the whole Fallout 4 settlement mechanic. How about make that part of the game where people can make these settlements, and you can claim on these settlements, but these settlements can also have the ability to be claimed against by another settlement and destroyed. And I think that you can do mechanics like that. You just have to make it powerful. And I think I've talked about this. I've talked about this before, actually. Like, people are afraid of asset destruction, and I understand that. Like, you're afraid some jackass is just gonna destroy your shit whenever you're logged offline sleeping, and that's annoying. Like, survival games have that problem. It's happened to me, guys, maybe 3 dozen times. Like, where I've lost my base that I put a lot of time into because like someone like glitched into our base or someone just like killed our base when we weren't there. Is that fun? No. Do some people find it fun? Actually, yeah. Some people find it fun to make it hard to get other people to get into their base, but obviously I don't. What I find fun is actually having the ability to fight against people at risk, right? So how do you do that? Well, people have created the idea of siege windows, where you make certain windows the only time that you can actually siege. Now, the problem with that for me is that, largely speaking, it makes your ability to kind of influence a territory control kind of seem like you can only do it at the playground after school when you're going to go fight. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of like you're going to get into a fight at school and like someone's like, meet me at the playground at 4 p.m. And like that's the only time you can fight them is like when you wait for them. It's like, no, like I didn't wait till 4 p.m. I was the kind of kid that I was like, anytime, anywhere. I was like an angry little boy. So like that kind of thing, like that analogy makes me think the exact same thing. It's like, you guys get what I'm saying? Little but poorly done. Isn't that just Fallout 76? I don't think so. They gimped the PvP based destruction in Fallout 76 when they removed survival PvP and added private lobbies. I think it's a good start in eating pot. You mean 76? Or damn, are we talking about my idea now? Lost. Anyway, yeah, so Fallout, I think, is definitely a franchise type for an MMO. I think it could be fun and exciting, and I think it will happen. Post-apocalyptic MMO happened. Fallout, Fallen Earth has happened. I was about to say Fallout Earth. It's basically Fallout Earth, but Fallen Earth happened already. Is that game going to get a reboot, or engine overhaul like it's kind of promising? Little Orbit isn't even sure about that, but it'd be pretty cool if it would happen. Just because I think it would prove to people idea is viable. And that's like very important when it comes to art. If people can understand that the idea is viable, they're more likely to try other attempts and hopefully better attempts. Yeah, Fallen Earth is getting redone, but the developers themselves have said that it's not their priority. APB is their priority, probably because it is more likely to be more successful and it's trendy. Also, because GTA and all of that. I also would say it probably has more to salvage. Not that Fallen Earth is a bad game. I think it's a good idea, and I think that it really does feel like Fallout, like an RPG, and I think that that's pretty cool. But the combat is just so bad. I think that nobody's gonna give it a shot. You know what I mean? That's why like they really have to fix the engine. Otherwise, I don't. They're not gonna give it a. Is it a fair shake if the combat's? You know what I'm saying? Is it a fair shake if the combat sucks? If it has all of these other aspects that are really, I don't know, hard to say. Gamers First was just greedy. I think Gamers First's intention with acquiring all of the IPs was to make money, not to create art. I think it kind of depends on your perspective. Some of these developers that acquire projects, why would they acquire a project or an IP? It's not to just create art and like la la la, like you know what I'm saying? Like people who acquire things are trying to make things from that, and usually it's money. In a bit of interesting, maybe kind of random, Broadsword, which is the guys behind the Ultima Online IP at the moment, announced that there's going to be an interesting new server for Ultima Online called New Legacy, and it's going to be targeting the 23rd birthday of the game, which is September 24th. Wait, actually, is that when their stream event is? Yeah, I was gonna say, wait, what? Okay, well, they don't even say for some reason. It just says whenever their anniversary is, so I guess it's coming soon. It's coming soon. Much anticipated next big project. So I looked into some of this to figure out more about this. If you guys are curious about Ultima Online and why they're still relevant in 2020, why are they creating a new server? Why does this matter? What I think is interesting about it is that basically the server, or shard as they call them in Ultima Online, is going to be free for users and pay. So meaning like you can pay, or if you're a paid user or a free user, you can still play on the shard. It will use the map from the original single player game. Like, interesting. I didn't even know that that was possible, but I guess shards allow for a lot of customization, and clearly they are the developers, so they can change whatever they want, right? There's going to be more of a focus on the RPG elements. Like what that's supposed to mean apparently is like they're changing like parts of the skills and the way that the skill system works, and I don't know how or why or whatever, but well, why I do know, because they're trying to make the RPG elements more of an integral part of the game. And that might sound strange, like why does that matter again, why does that matter in 2020? Because what they're attempting to do, actually, seriously, is what the game that I'm covering right now, Anarchy Online, attempted to do, and Asheron's Call actually did for 2 years, which is have a evolving storyline that literally changes over the course of weeks, months, whatever they update cycle. The idea is that there's going to be seasons, and each season will end in a shattering where the world will end, and there will be explained lore, and I think there's supposed to be some kind of like PvP event or something like that. Like there's a new world PvP system that's supposed to be not the whole Tramol thing, not the whole gank box, but maybe like a new PvP system they're coming up with. I have to wait to see more details, but this article that I'm looking at right now doesn't really say that much. It looks like you'd have to watch like 2 hours of this, or no, an hour of this stream to actually pick up on this. Yeah, this is a long ass thing. See? Like an hour and 20 minutes to find more details on it. But what I'm hearing already is already interesting. You know? I've thought about this myself. Like, why not just repurpose an old MMO like this? This is what I mean. I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Why not take an old game, go back to it in its classic form, whatever stage you think is its most viable stage, and create new content for it, right? We've talked about the plus, the classic plus. Like, why does that idea seem so strange for developers when they will continue to essentially let a game hop on its like seventh leg 15 years into the future after it's launched with another shell company and barely update the game? Like, why is that considered more viable than just saying, hey, let's do something new like this idea? Let's go back to another version of the game. Let's have a different server. Let's use our pre-existing assets to change the gameplay, but then let's add new assets to it progressively. AKA, they need to make money to do that. It seems like instead of starting from square zero, like making a new game, you're at least starting from somewhere. And instead of just continuing to update your game past a certain point, which the truth of the matter is, that a lot of the time, especially for a game like Ultima Online, which is very shard based, which people are very used to re-rolling on, it's not as attractive as having a new start. And this kind of is a bit of a tangent, but it brings me into the whole idea perspective of having seasonal based MMOs. Maybe MMOs that are more temporary. Like Crowfall has kind of broached this subject a little bit, right? And maybe a month is too short. Maybe a week is too short. Maybe it just depends, right? But like the idea that maybe a shard is based on a season that maybe goes for 6 months, maybe a year, something like that. Like, to me, that's very interesting because I think it gives developers something very manageable. Instead of thinking like, let's make content for the next 15 years. It's like, what the? It's not going to be balanced. After a while, it's just going to not be balanced. I'm sorry. It just can't be, right? You're like literally making a new game after a while. The old shit has become so different. It's kind of like whenever a game tries to do a classic server, but they use the current server code. It's like, not just the server code, but like the current patch cycle. At that point, it's not even the same. In this context, you're literally taking old content, but you're repurposing it with the intention to make new content. And I think that this is an idea that basically homecoming servers, private servers, emulated servers, a lot of these servers that have existed for a long time, kind of what they do, really, if you think about it. They take PvC and WoW, right? The Burning Crusade, or they take Lord of the Rings, or whatever game you could think of, and they think, what if we like added more content to this version? Because you might be asking, why would you want a version of the game that has less updates? Well, partly it's because they can shape the history of the game going forward differently, right? So they can change the future of it. Maybe there's aspects they want to change, aka the argument with Classic WoW or TBC. Or maybe it's actually because there's something inherently wrong with letting a world just operate for too long. And my point here being, look at our world like a comparison. The fact that it's lasted this long has created like innumerable amounts of complications, right? It's just that we don't design this video game ourselves. Either you believe somebody else did, someone else, some people did, or it just happened because of a couple of reactions and probability and all of that stuff. Point being is like, after worlds like operate for a while, like if you ever operated an ecosystem, you ever had a terranium, you ever taken care of plants, you know what I'm talking about. All it takes is just for a little bit of it to go wrong. Maybe like air is not clean, water's not clean, you got to clean water, and then next thing you know, you've got dead fish, got dead plants, right? And that kind of analogy is really important here because it tells you like there's more time for things to go wrong and for the balance of things to be interrupted. Why does this matter? Because whenever an MMO is created, it is basically a world with some sort of idea of what it's supposed to be. It has an identity. That identity shifts, changes, and molds into different things over time, which is okay, right? That's natural. That's what we all do. But after a while, a lot of these games go so far away from what they maybe originally were trying to be. And that's why a lot of people, of course, so interested in them going back to what they were. But it just makes me think about how many other MMOs out there in the world like this existed that were shut down, that they could have repurposed them in this. Maybe just said, let's do one last hurrah. And again, why didn't they? Probably because they didn't know how, they didn't know it's possible, didn't think attractive like that. But it's been proven that it is already. We've already seen other games, other companies actually purchase IPs, remake games. We saw Darkfall do it. We saw, like, I'm not going to sit there and say that that was the most successful, like, or the ones that did it were the most successful. But they've definitely had some level of success doing it. Look at Legends of Aria. I'm not going to say again they're super successful, but they've had a level of success just emulating UO, how the whole shard system works. That idea. And I think it allows you to keep reinventing the game because the game is basically big sandbox and not the big sandbox that you're thinking, the MMO sandbox, which is just a big open and Final Fantasy approach, not the MMO, the game, where it's just a big open land. Not that kind of approach, but sandbox in the sense that developers are actively changing things, parts of the game, and maybe even in the case of a shard, a player-run shard, the community is changing, tweaking things. That's what creates content and creates parity and creates enjoyment. We could use a shattering. It changes design. Having to design for years in the future when no one else is around can be restrictive. And not to mention, Atric, you lose the original developers. There's so many things that go wrong in continuing the same designs and continuing to try and evolve. I'm not trying to say that you just do it. Actually, maybe I am. I might have a bit of an extreme point, but my argument is I would actually prefer, and I know that businesses would never prefer this because they want to just keep milking amount of effort and risk, but I personally would design MMOs to not have long shelf life. I would design them to be iterative or design them to essentially have a ticking timers. This game is going to run for 3 years, but it's going to be an amazing 3 years. You better be along for the ride, right? Like maximize revenue in those 3 years, really focus all the talent in those 3 years. And then after that, if we have enough success, then maybe go do another one. Maybe make a sequel. The reason why I have more interest in doing that kind of MMO versus the one that lasts forever is I think to make the kind that can last forever, it's so damn hard. You need gameplay that can last the test of time because to me, gameplay over anything is more important when it comes to age. I've always been very passionate about that. Like, I can play a game that's from 93, 7, from 9, from 2001, from 2003. I can play old games as long as the gameplay is fun. I don't care about graphics. I don't. I never have. I don't really care about sound and all that stuff as much. Maybe some other people. The story I definitely do care about, so it can't have poor story. But even like I can play a game that has no story if the gameplay is really good, even if it's old. So I think that's always been like my key, like, core principle, if you will. So I believe that having a MMO on a shelf life allows you to maximize. Hey, NSO, watch how far back you lean. Oh, my bad. Let me see what my sensitivity is. It might be too low, actually. Weird. It's not nearly as sensitive as it was before. Let me check my... MMOs are like shows. I prefer where they have a planned in instead of letting them peter out. I think that... I wonder, like, what everyone's opinion is on that, Yul. Thanks for the 100-bit donation, by the way. I wonder how many people would prefer an MMO keep trying to keep going, basically, versus just trying to have its best 3, 4, 5 years. And I think the answer to that question is probably the core like thesis of my channel, right? I don't find it fun nor helpful for the industry to have MMOs basically just peter out into nothingness. I think they're much better off to just let the community handle them at that point. Move on to greener pastures if you're not going to actually like keep evolving the game. The very idealistic perspective in a sense that you can argue why would they give up their IP? But my kind of perspective is if you're not actually going to challenge and use your IP, then you shouldn't have rights to it. Not actually using it. You're not actually like leveraging it. You're just sitting on it, basically. Be right back. Babysitting niece. Switch on phone. No problem, man. Hey, NS, watch how far back you lean, how much you turn your head, because audio cuts when you... That's interesting. I don't know why it's probably my, oh, I know what it is now. It's my mic settings. I forgot, because I have filters. And my filter probably, whenever I am not loud enough, it doesn't pick up the voice, because it doesn't qualify it as being loud enough to trigger gate, essentially. So I need to fix that later, because I hate having to like make out with my microphone. Like, don't get me wrong, it's better that way for sound, but I hate having to always stand right here and just like put my face right here. I would love a new MMO that runs like Asheron's Call. Or is that, yeah, okay, Asheron's Call, where the story and game progresses so players can participate and push who the politics and stuff go in story. Or like where the politics and stuff goes in story. Yeah, I agree. Now I'm starting to become robotic. Oh no. Maybe this mic is dying, who knows? Am I still a robot? Limpos is bad luck, man. He speaks and he turns me into a robot. What do you think about PA developing other MMOs while also developing Black Desert Online? Pearl Abyss, huh? What do I think about Pearl Abyss working on those other games? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, it's hard, man. Like, I've done so many Death of a games where I look at a game that failed and I think maybe if this game had a little bit more rub, a little bit more shine in a stable of like 2 other games, maybe 1 other game, maybe even 3 other games sometimes, it would have done better. It would have done well. But a lot of the time the game itself also just has its own problems. And so it's kind of one of those things where you could say that like which one comes first, like the egg or chicken or the egg? Is it, do problems arise because there's shared load, shared risk, shared weight of trying to manage maybe like 2 or 3 games at the same time? Or is it because the game itself is flawed, so then it makes that more of a problem? You know, like it's hard to say which one comes first exactly. Obviously, a company like Tryon, we can study very succinctly. I would say that they are a good example of maybe a company overstepping how many games they're working on, because Tryon was a game that went, or a company that went from basically like small, humble, well, were they humble right away? I mean, because like Rift was humble, but then they put out other games, and I think during the dev cycle of Rift, they were already working. So no, I think actually Tryon was pretty aggressive and not humble. They were ambitious from the very beginning. I forgot they had venture capitalist funds, which meant that they might have had some original OG talent in the MMO space who might have handled things a little bit better. But they had that venture capitalist money. And I think that Tryon Worlds is a good example of having too many baskets instead of too many eggs in one basket. You know what I'm saying? Like the saying is, if you just put all of your eggs in one basket and that basket is failing, then that can't be good, right? Because then if your company, like, a good example of that is, I almost called it Tryon World, but I meant Troika. Troika was a good example of that. They were basically a developer for hire, which was pretty common back in the day. You would essentially pitch your project, find a publisher, and then that's how you got hired. And then you would get enough money, so then you could go do it again. And that's what Troika did as well. Troika did that with a couple of their games where they had to basically go make games and make them quickly so they could afford to make more games because they couldn't afford to do it otherwise, because they didn't have outside funding and they didn't take in a bunch of funding in the same way that a company like Tryon Worlds did. Now, the thing about that, though, is that they're doing it to stay afloat. Tryon was doing it to basically take market share. They were doing it to make a big move, a big play. So that is a bit different. I think that came across as maybe that's not the best approach. Maybe a couple of those games didn't get the best attention. You look at some of those games, and especially like Cryptic is another good example of that. Cryptic Studios. Maybe a couple of those games could have enjoyed more time in their own spotlight, like not using the exact same engine so they play like the exact same way. Maybe change it in some ways. Maybe make it a little bit more unique. But kind of this whole factory style of popping out games with really sexy IPs it was a thing. It was a thing in 2007 through 2011, and it dominated that time. And so that's why we have so many of those, especially in. It's the cable, all right? Sounds good? Okay, cool. Thanks. Dem. I appreciate that. I definitely think an unproven studio working on multiple projects at once is problematic. I do too, no matter how much talent you have. I just think that, from my perspective, working in construction, we work on multiple projects a lot. But even then, that's like pretty bare minimum. It really depends on how big your company is. When we were a company that was like, I still work. I don't. Thank you guys, by the way. Support. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to barely do this, which I would take way over succeeding in a construction field, because this is way cooler of a job and way more enjoyable. But in construction, where I was working before, I worked in corporation, territory. It was I would probably say like 40, 50 person workspace. A job might have like 5 people on it. When I say a job, I mean like a construction site. So like at the most, we would have maybe like 6, 7 crews out there. Like we wouldn't always have everyone working at the same time. But you get what I'm saying is, like, you have a couple of your crews out there working on these different projects. Now, what happens if something goes wrong? Uh-oh. Now I might need to grab some other people for my other job that's not priority and then take them over here to work on my priority project. That happened all the time. So like I might have a job that's not another week, but I might have a job that the inspector is going to be there tomorrow. So I'm like, oh, and like, so I might pull 2 of my best guys from this project over here. And that's the kind of like rationale I use when it comes to video game projects. It might not be one-to-one, but I know project management and it's not that different, right? So that's kind of where my reasoning comes from, that logic. I'm honestly really excited to see how PA handles the future games, but I'm a bit fearful for what it means for BDO. Yeah, I think that Pearl Abyss obviously is talented. They have cacao level money behind them, so at this point, I want to hope that them acquiring EVE Online and EVE Online, or CCP rather, advertising that they were working. I hope all of that wasn't just like marketing. I hope all of that is real. I hope that Pearl Abyss is working on a new game with CCP. And I hope it's a game that actually allows you to control your damn ship. No. Hey, we can dream, right? Very passionate about these business topics, and I can't call in due to work, but I text dumped my thoughts into the office channel. Sorry in advance. It's okay. I'll check it out. Yeah, if you guys ever have big takes that you want to drop in Discord, don't feel bad. I like listening and reading that stuff. I might not always respond because, you know, I'm always doing stuff. Like right now, I'm writing my Anarchy Online script, and this thing is huge. Look at how big this thing is. I'm just going to show you the research. So what I like to do is almost like whatever is... My brain, as I mentioned, isn't very explicit. So it doesn't work in order. I kind of just put things relevant on there. But I organize things in a timeline because my brain doesn't. Unless I put things in sequential order specifically. So while I prefer to just kind of have things looser, in order to create the formula of the Death of a Game series, it makes more sense to follow things on a timeline by timeline basis. Whereas before, I used to do things a little bit more kind of open-ended. But anyway, so like have some images and stuff. Maybe some of the population data, early reviews and articles. History about the company, Funcom, of course. Quotes, competition enters the fray, right? Because we're talking about the early 2000s here. We have some articles from GameSpot, some of their hands-on, Metacritic stuff. As you see, it just keeps going, basically. I just dump whatever I think is relevant to the story on here, even if I don't always mention one of these callbacks here. But all of these are timestamped, and they have an article underneath, and sometimes they even have a quote that I think is relevant. So I can just go here, and I pull open 2 of these on my computer. One on the other monitor, one on this monitor. I write in this monitor. I use the other one for like my overview. And let's see. So yeah, we talk about the expansions here, Galaxy's launches. It's like, hello, Galaxy's launched. The color coded, if you're wondering, basically just means like level of relevancy. Green means that it's like super relevant. Anything that's not green, red, or a variant of those basically just means like it's a quote, maybe an important quote like this color. The yellow means like, hey, pay attention. Green means like, hey, this is something that's really good. Red means that this is something that's bad. Orange means that this is an event, but what does it mean? You know, kind of thing. Here's some financials I throw in there as well. Every now and then you find whatever you can basically to make the case. See. We're still going. We're in 2009. This is a big one. Anarchy Online's huge. I'm hoping that the script isn't that huge, but the research so far is huge. I mean, it's a game that's existed for like 19 years. So can you imagine like the story behind it? Population data right here. Different MMOs and stuff. And then down here I have pros, cons, my prognosis, like reasons I think why. Little timeline that I like to use. biobreak.wordpress.com/MMO-timeline. That shit is really good. Based on my definition of dead, which is definition. Yes, I believe it's dead. I mean, okay, let's scroll up and just look at the population for a second. I don't know about you guys. All-time peak 22 players. It's weird if we can't consider that dead at that point. I think it's just semantics at that point. What else do we have to talk about? So Riot Games backed an Afro fantasy MMO titled The Bugatti Chronicles. It actually went live on Kickstarter and already eclipsed its targeted funding amount. That's interesting. There's not a whole lot to show from this. I think they have a small amount of gameplay.
For you to roleplay with others.
Interesting. Somebody brought this to me, actually. Scribbles mentioned how they're backed by Riot and yet there's Kickstarter. I do think that is pretty interesting. Honestly, it's kind of weird, if I'm being honest. It gives me a bit of a weird feeling. But I think part of that probably comes from the fact that a lot of the time Kickstarter is used for advertisement purposes.
And we're behind the Bugatti Chronicles, a 5th edition setting and an online RPG.
Alright, so 5th edition.
Chances
RPG.
are,
Let's skip ahead. I want to see if there's any
so you're
gameplay.
role-playing somewhere completely brand new.
They're showing some of the engine
Well,
gameplay.
this is the Bugatti Chronicles.
Looks like
An
a
MMORPG to make
isometric ARPG style game.
We have a weather system.
Sorry, like I know this is all cool and all of that, and
bigger
like,
roles.
hey, I'm all about
No,
history
and
and culture.
They
But
want
I
to
just,
do
at this
with their own
point,
roles. They were
I'm like a
actually
zombie. I
role-playing.
just want to see the
And
gameplay.
this
Whenever I see
completely
anything
brand new.
MMO, I just want to see
Well,
the
this
gameplay.
is
I just want to
the
hear the
Bugatti
systems and see the
Chronicles.
gameplay.
An MMORPG built exclusively.
I think in this, I think part of it is like market. I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, put up or shut up. Like I'm so tired hearing all of the reasons, all the ideas, and again, there's no offense to any of these people who talk. I get it, it's their jobs. I'm just like, all right, cool, okay, cool. But it's like, can the game run with a bunch of players on the screen?
Setting created
Can the game
for
run
this
and
new
satisfy the
Afro
features it's
fantasy
trying to
world.
satisfy?
Your support will
That's what I'm more interested in. I think the visuals look interesting. I'll say that. Right as I say that, we get this girl with really cool hair, but that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about like this purple stuff. Y'all have this like cool visual shot, but then y'all pan away so quickly. Get it? They're trying to show like their cast and stuff. I'll be honest, I don't care about the cast in terms of diversity, in terms of who they are, as long as are they experienced? Do they have experience making MMOs? Do they play MMOs? That's probably the most important thing. Like, do they play MMOs? Like, if they don't play them, you know, red flag, red flag. I can't. I've seen that so many times where like developers don't even play MMOs and they sign them. That's a super red flag. But yeah, this is just like a a Kickstarter video. There's not a whole lot of gameplay or whatever. They're just showing off their team. They're showing off their art, their unique background. They're asking for funding and so. Let's see, navigation system. We are implementing a navigation winds and sea dangers that allows you to move from one island to the other on your own. So like, you mean like flying to a different zone, or like taking a boat to a different zone? What the hell does that even mean? And then swallow manifestation. You will implement all swallow sublineage. I think that's like sublineages in the game, including their unique mechanics. Looks like they give you a free lore book here, which is, it's cool and all, but I also think like we're getting to the stage of we're almost having like a renaissance of like indie games and online games and demos. We're seeing a lot more demos lately. I would like to see a future practice going forward to see more demos. And even if you're making an MMO, what if you could at least make a single player demo just so people could test the combat of it? I think something like that would be a lot cooler than seeing a lore book. No offense, I don't think a lot of people are going to read that kind of stuff. In my experience playing MMOs, as much as I love lore and story, the general public, if that's who you're trying to go after, if you've got like Riot teaming up with you, they're going to ignore a lot of that stuff. All right. So they don't have a lot of Kickstarter goals, which is interesting because usually a lot of these places have a lot of goals. Stretch goals, and to be specific, I should say. So this is like pre-alpha footage right here they're showing. I don't know. I don't see enough here to ever feel like I could like suggest you guys to go donate money to this. Not that I ever would anyway with any Kickstarter period, unless it was my own, of course. And I was trying to get funding for my own game. Because of course, then I have to believe. Otherwise, why the hell am I working on it? Look at that. So it says Riot Games, Kickstarter, Twin Drums, Bugatti Chronicles. We have some funding and support from a big developer. MMOs are very expensive, as we know. So clearly, a couple grand isn't going to cut it. But the fact that they're not maybe being completely transparent about that, you can argue is more of like a opinion thing. But I don't know. I would like more transparency. I would give more transparency. Okay, let's see. So here are some of the packages. I want to see what the most expensive package is. Oh dear. For 9,400, you can be a co-designer of Wagadude. Okay. You get to go to the Twin Drums offices to play a 5e session with the team and have a dinner. What happens in the session will turn out to be Lord Canon. Interesting. While I think this is a cool idea, if this isn't actually like, okay, it's not even including travel expenses, who on earth is gonna pay this shit? I mean, I know that there's like really rich people and shit, but like, I'm just saying, like, if I was gonna offer this, I'd be like, oh, we will include travel expenses, and then make it that much money. But yeesh. Okay, so this is the version without actually traveling to their offices, like twice the price to go there, even though you have to fly there as well. I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. It definitely looks unique. I have to say that I'm a fan of Afro fantasy. I think it's a unique genre. It's not fully explored. I can definitely see a lot of the Zelda vibes in this game, as you can see right here. Yeah. So they were basically showing off the navigation system right there. Things are moving around in the game, creating events basically, which is, this is all marketing for, we're placing things here that are on timers or have certain triggers, which I'm not saying is like bad to like phrase them in a different way, but that's all it means at the end of it. It's cool though how they show that and stuff to make it seem like very complex and stuff. I enjoy that. Okay, this is just running around. I thought this was someone like on a boat or some shit. I was thinking maybe they were going for like Wind Waker, where you ride around on your boat. That would be pretty cool. They actually could get away with that too, with the kind of setting, the art style. You could ride around on your boat, maybe. Get some of that vibe going on. Who knows? I got nothing else on that. Did you guys hear that RuneScape is going to get launched on Steam? And apparently there's like a big fear that they're going to bomb the hell out of RuneScape. People are afraid it's going to get review bombed. Obviously, you know, there's been talk that it's not going to happen. Old school RuneScape fans are telling people don't review bomb it. But still, it's like, to me, this actually kind of backs up what I was saying in Discord a week ago, which was kind of like, or 2 weeks ago at this point. That Jagex they're making big moves in the MMO space, or living world space as they call it, which they make sure to have a distinction, which I respect. But at the same time, if they launch on other platforms, they'll just call it an MMO all the time, because why not, right? Like, for example, I'm reading right here, it says MMO, but on their website, it doesn't say MMO. Isn't that funny how that works? It's like they don't want to be held accountable for calling it an MMO. They just want to say that, like, oh, well, Steam called it. Wasn't us, you know? But why are they launching on Steam? Probably to get some of that extra, you know, only Steamers. Is there a word for that? Do we have a word for those people yet? Do we want to come up with a word for that? What do we call people who only play Steam? Only Steamers? Dumbasses. Cult of Gaben. It's so funny that it's a thing though. Like, I've been playing like obscure ass games, like especially MMOs. They'll get a launch on Steam, and all of a sudden it's like the population shoots up like 100-fold. But it's like the idiots shoot up 100-fold too. I'm sorry. Gabenites. Wagadu is just going to be Albion in Africa. You know what, Sork? As much as I want to disagree with you, kind of looks like that. But hey, if they can come up with like a way to travel around with like boats and shit like that, and you know, maybe take some inspiration from Ultima Online, which by the way had that in like yeah. It does look like that. That's funny. No, I'm with the memes today. If you guys have good memes, I can't deny them. Even if they're not, you know, correct. You just can't deny a good meme. What else came out? Let's just talk, huh? I don't think there's any other like news items I was gonna cover, so if you guys would just like to talk and ask me questions about whatever, now's the time to do that. So let's do that. And then I need to get back to writing this damn script, as you guys can see. I'm like, how far am I? I'm probably like a third done. I should be able to finish it today. So you guys don't have to hate me. Anarchy Online is gonna be I think it's gonna be a banger. I think you guys are really gonna enjoy it. It's has a really interesting Anarchy Online is it might be, I know I said Asheron's Call is the most underrated MMO. Might change that. I might have to say it's Anarchy Online. And the reason I'm saying that is if you just look at like in terms of like innovations, in terms of what they were able to come up with how much money they had versus like how much money like Microsoft, Sony, freaking who am I missing? Microsoft, Sony, who was the other one? My brain. Awesome. Asheron's Call was Microsoft. Was EverQuest. Galaxies was Sony as well. Ultima. Nintendo. Ultima. Ultima was it at the time? Was it Electronic Arts at the time? Because it was Origin Systems, and then it was EA. Yeah, EA. Thank you, Mr. Nylon. I forgot they got acquired pretty early on. To be fair, Hades came out of early access with its 1.0, and that's why a lot of people are also playing it now. The Steam charts is wrong, though, about player population. Just don't take for their word. Because it only says I have 2 minutes played in game when I'm... Yeah, Steam charts might not be perfect, but anytime somebody tells me the argument Steam charts are wrong, or population data is wrong, my argument is always, show me better data. Because if you can't, even though I can take your opinion at face value and trust your opinion, I can't replace the data that I have because the data that I have is better than no data. So, it's the best data we got. If they just told us everything, I think it'd be... But why won't they tell us? Almost like they don't want us to know how many people are playing an MMO. Because then that will create fear. It's leaving the game, mass exoduses, which is how you kill online worlds. So in a sense, I can understand. In a sense, it's annoying because obviously I cover these things all the time, and it's constantly annoying to have to argue against player bases about population data when at the end of the day, we should be kind of just agreeing. There isn't any population data. That's something we can agree on. Like a fanboy of Star Trek, for example, can agree with me that their game based on population data isn't the best, but it's like, okay, right? They can agree with me on that. Where they would disagree with me is if the game is still considered dead, right? Because they'll be like, well, I think it's alive with 100 players or 1,000 players or whatever. And that's kind of where we can disagree. But anyway, remember when Blizzard told us the subs? Yeah, only when they had like quadrillion, you know? That's the only time developers are going to tell you that. Not to be confused with Origin, the company which is... Yeah, sorry, I meant Origin Systems was the name of the company. Origin Systems was the company behind Ultimate. Origin Systems, which was Richard Garriott and Raph Koster, they and Star Long, they got acquired by EA. I think during the process of UO, basically, and then kept making UO. So it was EA versus Microsoft versus Sony. So it was some pretty big titans of the space. And here you have Little Anarchy Online from Scandinavia with basically no serious MMO developers behind it, just a really good writer, designer, a talented team, and, the vision, basically. You want to make a sci-fi game, sci-fi world. And how it was able to accomplish, as much as it was able to accomplish, despite having probably the worst MMO launch ever. This is like, think about this. Like, Funcom has a history of bad launches. Don't get me wrong. In fact, pretty much all of their games have had bad launches. But Funcom literally wrote the book on bad MMO launches with Anarchy Online. But they didn't give up. And they went on just 1 or 2 years later to release one of the best expansions in MMO history, Shadowlands. So, like, I think that it's a very nuanced story. There's a lot of like, oh, Funcom, damn it. That's Funcom as a company. But there's a lot of like, man, look at what they were able to come up with. They had the idea of like living story back in 2000. Like, what? They had the idea. They came up with drop-down, toggleable, and resizable chat boxes, games. They came up with dynamic missions. I wonder how many people are even aware of that kind of stuff. They had open world PvP like that early on, to the extent that they did, with like territory control, and you could actually capture bases. Anarchy Online was impressive, for sure. I love pointing out that some games do better than other games with Steam charts. It gets people so angry. It does, and I don't understand why. Because to me, it's more interesting to wonder why that happens than to pick a side. You know what I'm saying? Because like, I see myself as I'm on the side of MMO. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm on the side of video games. I'm on the side of the consumer. Like, I want art for all of us to be better, so it's better for all of us, so we enjoy ourselves more, right? Like, that's my argument, basically. Like, obviously, it's more nuanced than that, but at the core, that's my argument. But it's always interesting, and actually, someone wrote about it recently on Massively Overpowered, which is like the concept of just being like a militant fan for something. Like, at what point are you even like, are they paying you? Like, why are you so much of a fan of this certain game and like so unwilling to take any criticism or any like, like telling somebody, for example, hey, this game didn't do well compared to this game on Steam charts. I've seen it trigger people before. And I kind of look at that as like, yes, people can be an asshole about that, but I think we should be asking ourselves, like, why is that? For example, why did the culling keep failing? While other games, which I don't know if they are better necessarily, are doing better, right? Like, the culling has failed multiple times. Why does it keep failing? Other BRs or other survival games do better. It's a validation of a hobby. I think that there is certainly something there, but I guess where my interest about that like come into play is a hobby is gaming. My hobby isn't playing StarCraft. You know what I'm saying? Like, my hobby is playing a game. But I guess if you only play one game, maybe that makes sense, but it's kind of like my hobby isn't just basketball. Technically, like, even when I was playing a lot of sports, it was just kind of sports in general. Like, I'm not trying to say everyone is like that per se. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I was interested in athletic pursuits, just like I'm interested in video games. So to me, I'm more interested in the genres, like in a broad sense, than I'm worried or thinking about like a specific, version of that. So maybe I just can't relate to that per se. It's not entirely a foreign concept. People get quite frustrated when faced with the notion that they are somehow wasting their time with something. That I totally agree with that. In fact, that's why I made my series. I was one of those people. I got frustrated all the time. Because I realized that a lot of the shit you were being told was bullshit. And here's what I mean, guys. Like, you're told, like, oh, maintenance mode, like, come on, it's not a bad thing. Like, the game's still, we're still making content. We're still gonna be doing things. Like, we're still fine. Like, the game is still full steam ahead. We're just gonna keep making money off of it. I can't tell you how many times I felt like that happened to me in hindsight. Where I'm like, looking back, you guys didn't have the pulse. Y'all weren't okay. Y'all kept it a secret. Y'all were in trouble the whole time. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I started realizing, like, just because I like these games doesn't mean necessarily need help. Look at her. She's trying to open. She doesn't want to open the door. Not open the door? She's just like, I don't know. MMO population chart. I don't think I've ever seen a single accurate piece of. They said like SWTOR had like 1 million players or something. Posted that to me. Y'all really believe this shit? It says an estimate literally on the website. It says they're estimating. Like, this is no better than me making a website calling it MMORPGpopulationdata.com and then telling you guys like my opinion on what I think the population is. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what some of those websites literally do. Right, Sorkin. I'm saying that's not an argument. Like, saying that there's not that good of info out there isn't an argument, because the point is if the game was doing well, wouldn't there be like data everywhere? For example, like when your game's doing well, you would show it literally everywhere. There'd be advertisement. The population data would be apparent. People could easily defend the fact that there was players in the game, that it was popular, right? But the fact that people can't, to me, is just as effective as basically not having the most effective data, right? Like, maybe I don't have the most, none of us do actually have the most effective data, but having an argument that people don't have the reverse data, which is to make an argument against it, is gives me the solace to feel like my videos are essentially pieces of they're educational, but they're also something that somebody can feel free to disagree with. But in order to disagree with it, you can't just say you disagree. You have to literally come up with a better argument. And I feel like beauty of the Death of a Game series is I try and make the arguments as well rounded as possible, so they can't just be dismissed with, right, but there's no concrete population data. It's like, yeah, but that's the case with pretty much every MMO. So it's like that. It's not really a point. You know what I'm saying? When some company says we have this amount of players, I cut it in half. You just have to listen to what they say. Companies these days have to actually like say things properly. They can't just say players. They have to say players, subscribers, and they keep these things separate. So like when you see that someone says players played versus like active players, those are two different things. Like maybe an active player base is only 3,000 players for a game, but maybe the player base itself played that month is like 100,000, right? But that means that there's that much churn, and there's also not that many active players. Now, what constitutes active? I think that depends, and many games define it differently. Final Fantasy, for example, considers active to be you've completed the storyline. So they consider their active 1 million. I think they're at 1 million already players, people who've completed the storyline, which I think is a pretty good measure of active players. It was easier when you could reverse engineer pop from company revenue data, but cash shops have made that impossible because it's so variable how each user pays. I think that's true to some extent, Ulysses, but I also think that, like, in my experience, like, Funcom, for example, gives you financial. Like, if we go to Funcom financial, their most recent financials, we won't see a single mention of Anarchy on here, probably past just saying it exists. All right, so right here they mentioned that it exists. Cool. Still telling us it exists. It's more saying which IPs they own. Mentioning it exists again. All right. I didn't see any mention of it in their actual financials. So let's see. These things are kind of like shown like almost like advertisements to the board. So if they look like that, they kind of are. All right. So here they're talking about their revenue. They had a down year, a slight down year. Usually, like for example, they're talking about what's on the horizon. Moons of Madness, Conan Chop Chop, doing multiplayer, open world game. They're going to launch their Mutant Chronicles game. So they're developing a lot of titles, which is probably why their money's low right now. Now, a lot of the time they'll tell you, well, NCSoft and Nexon will tell you literally exactly what the games are doing in terms of revenue. And you don't have to like assume and extrapolate and subtract with a bunch of other games and all of that kind of stuff. But it looks like their financials are intentionally broad. They don't break it down by game, which kind of sucks. 'Cause, yeah, I'm not seeing a breakdown by game. So yeah, their financials are going to be really hard to dive into. But I'll give you an example of Nexon. They're much easier. Not there. Presentation. All right. So here is the financials. Nexon. Boom. They talk about the highlights here. Revenues, operating income, net income, year on year. Are they improving? Are they in a deficit? Their revenue by platform, their revenue by area of the world. Look at America, 8%. And Europe, by the way, 8% of Nexon's revenue. What else? They should be talking about the games down here. Here we go. They talk about the platforms, PC, mobile. Talking about some joint ventures, what's in the pipeline, some of their financials. Dang, does Nexon not do it anymore either? Because they definitely break it down by region. Key titles by... See, yeah, they do it like this now. What this means, guys, is that you have to extrapolate basically which one is doing the heavy lifting. So, for example, in China, they say that these 3 games are doing the heavy lifting. China's making them the most money by far, 112 billion yen. So which game is making them the most of that money? That's kind of what you have to figure out by extrapolating. Some of these sometimes they'll tell you exactly like data. Like for example, this tells you MapleStory has made 3 billion USD, and it'll tell you the revenue right here, just about like give or take. So they're not nearly as accurate as the next one I'm going to show you, which is super accurate. So this is all projections and stuff. Like those are just graphs that look nice. But NCSoft, on the other hand, probably the most effective company at tracing their financials to see how their games are, because they break them down by game and they break it down by region. So you can really kind of know what this site. Since when did this site take 17 years? This is not the one that I'm looking for. Or is it the fact sheet? These are too short. They're definitely much bigger than this. Here we go. All right, so this is how I normally do it. If you guys are ever wondering how I can kind of come up with how much people are playing a game or how many players are playing a game, how successful a game is doing, you can just take games like Lineage 2, Guild Wars, Blade and Soul, Ion, and you can essentially reverse engineer them, as Ulysses was saying. You can figure out how much money they're making, how many, how much of that is being made in which region. Check different outlets such as maybe Steam, maybe aggregate player sites, or like sometimes sites tell you like how many players are playing a game based on like player reported tests, for example. So sometimes you can check those, cross-reference those. You do all of that, and if you come back and you just have low numbers like Ion here, like these numbers are low enough to where I know, because I've checked their financials enough to know that they're not doing well right now. This is a very low year for them. Especially, well, this quarter was low for them specifically because I went back a couple of years just to make it easier. But you could see that they weren't doing that well. And this is like the very start of the mobile game craze. This is much higher now, by the way. But this is kind of how you can see, like, it's hard to know exactly how the market is going to shift when you look at things like this. But the point is that you can see like mobile games were going to take over, for example. We knew that in 2018. Or maybe even earlier, honestly. We also knew that Ion was slowing down, so they had to reboot the game, which they did. Blade and Soul 2, which they promised a new engine. So, like, these different things, Guild Wars 2, new expansion. So, like, these different things, they all make sense when you look at their financials. Because it's not like art is just created out of nowhere. It does have to make sense. Sense into them dollars. Have you been playing Final Fantasy 14? I have not. But I have kind of been away. I've just been hiking and going up mountains and yeah, not really doing not really playing a lot of games. Just Crusader Kings, honestly. Like there's no MMO right now that like I'm really like excited to play. Though I will say that I still plan on doing my Albion online review. And after I'm done with that, then I'll pick another MMO to actually play fully. I've tried to do classic games, and I can never find enough people to stick around to play them. And those classic games really require you to have players, so it's like, I don't feel like going in and just joining a new guild, so I'd rather just have a new play experience. These newer games make a lot more sense for me, monetarily speaking, to make reviews on and videos on, obviously. But in terms of like enjoyment of like what MMO right now is like jumping out at me to play, nothing really, to be honest. Like that's out right now. But in terms of reviewing Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls, those are all on the list. I plan on playing WoW Shadowlands, but honestly, I'm not looking forward to it. That's hilarious. That's like the classic WoW expansion. I guess I'm most looking forward to seeing what New World looks like when it finishes development. Yeah, I'm in put up or shut up mode right now. I want to play games. I definitely want to play games that create relationships and online experiences and dynamic and emergent gameplay. Those are the kind of games that I want to play. Not more of the same rinse and repeat. All right, I'm actually gonna head off because I need to go do. I need to go finish writing Anarchy Online for you guys. Otherwise, y'all yell at me. Just kidding. I know you guys don't yell at me. But I'm gonna go work on that instead. Game that incentivizes community. Absolutely. That's what I'm more looking forward to right now. Because I get bored of the competitive games. I play a lot of them. League, I play the Call of Duty games. I'll play whatever. Like I play the competitive games, but I get bored of those. I just want a game that I want to feel like I'm protecting a territory. I'm protecting a guild. I'm building up the resources. Something that I'm a lot more involved in just I press the button, I'm loaded into a rank match, and boom, bam, boom. Like That's just me personally. I've kind of been that way since I was like 7, basically. So don't have a choice at this point, right? Just like those kinds of games. Anyway, thanks for watching me, guys. This was episode 94 of the 6 Pixels Under podcast. Been all over the place as we normally do. And I'd like to thank you guys for stopping by and watching me as always. Good to see you guys. Of course, back from my trip. We'll be back next week as usual. And Anarchy Online is the next death of a game. What else? Make sure to check out my New World preview if you haven't already. If you have any thoughts, questions, let me know on Discord if you couldn't get to them today. And suggestions as well. What else? I think that's it. All right, guys. I'll see y'all later. Peace.